The papers were already on the kitchen counter when I got home, not in an envelope, not tucked away somewhere private. Just sitting there, centered, like she'd placed them with intention, the way you set a plate at a dinner table. Deliberately, the word petition was printed at the top in bold black letters, and my name, Daniel Marsh, appeared twice on the first page before I could even bring myself to read the rest. I stood in the doorway, still holding my work bag, still wearing my jacket from a full day at the lumberyard, and I just stared. The house smelled like whatever Collie had made for dinner, something with garlic. And I remember thinking how strange it was, how the smell of a home-cooked meal and the end of a 12-year marriage could exist in the same room at the same time. Collie came out of the bedroom about 2 minutes later. She didn't look angry. That was the part I wasn't prepared for. She looked tired. Like she'd already done this 100 times in her mind and was now just waiting for the real version to catch up. "I think you know why," she said. "I didn't, actually. Or maybe I did, and I just refused to believe it was a real reason. Let me back up, because if I don't, none of this makes sense. Collie and I met in our mid-20s. She was working at a physical therapy clinic in Boise, and I came in after a bad fall from a loading dock left me with a cracked rib and a separated shoulder. She had this way of explaining things, medical things, in plain, honest language that didn't talk down to you. I liked that. I liked her. We were married 3 years later, and for a long time things were good. Not perfect, but real. The kind of good that comes from two people actually choosing each other every day. Our daughter, Maisie, was born in 2014. She was everything from the moment she arrived. This tiny, loud, opinionated person who somehow already knew exactly who she was. She laughed like Collie. She had my stubbornness. The trouble when it started was subtle. It came on like a weather change you don't notice until you're already wet. I am, by most accounts, a private man. I don't talk about my feelings easily. I solve problems quietly and I process things alone. Collie had always known this about me, or I assume she had, and for years it wasn't a point of friction. But somewhere around year 8, maybe 9, it started mattering to her in a different way. She wanted more from me, more words, more presence. Not just someone sitting across from her at the table, but someone who was actually in the conversation. And I kept falling short. I'm not saying she was wrong. I'm saying I didn't know how to do what she was asking for. My father wasn't a verbal man. His father wasn't either. I knew how to show love by showing up, by fixing things, by working. I didn't know how to sit with someone in the middle of their feelings and not try to immediately solve whatever was causing them. It created distance. Small at first, then larger. Then one day Collie started meeting with a therapist, her own, just for her. And I told myself that was good, that I supported it. What I didn't realize was that the therapist was helping Collie put language to things she'd been feeling for years. Including language about me. The word she used that night in the kitchen, after I'd finally set my bag down and sat at the table, was unavailable. She said, "Daniel, I've been talking to someone who is emotionally unavailable for 11 years. I've tried, I've asked. I've given you space to figure it out on your own. And you're a good man. I genuinely believe that, but good isn't always enough." I asked her what she meant by unavailable. Not defensively, actually. I asked because I genuinely wanted to understand what I'd been doing, or not doing. She talked for a long time. About specific moments. The night her dad had a scare and was rushed to the ER in Tucson, and I'd driven her there and sat in that waiting room for 6 hours but never once reached for her hand. About Maisie's first day of kindergarten when Collie had cried in the car afterward and I'd handed her a napkin from the glove box and turned the radio back on. About last Christmas when she told me she felt lonely and I'd responded by making a list of activities we could do together. "You treated my loneliness like a scheduling problem," she said. I didn't have a response to that. Because she was right. But here's the thing, the part I couldn't communicate that night, and maybe had never communicated in the 11 years before it, was that every single thing I'd ever done, I'd done for her. The extra shifts I'd picked up at the yard so she could reduce her clinic hours. The way I'd learned to cook 3 of her favorite meals when her mother passed. The Thursday night drives I took Maisie on so Collie could have the house to herself. None of that translated to her, and I didn't know how to make it. So I signed the papers. Not because I wanted the marriage to end, but because I didn't know how to argue against something that was, in a lot of ways, true. We decided on a 30-day separation before anything was finalized. I moved into a month-to-month rental about 12 minutes from the house. Nothing special. 2 bedrooms, beige walls, the kind of carpet that feels like it's absorbed a decade of other people's bad years. Maisie came to me on weekends. She's a perceptive kid, always has been, and she didn't ask a lot of questions about what was happening. But you could see her watching us both, filing things away. She brought her art supplies every visit and spent most of Saturday afternoon drawing at the kitchen table while I pretended to watch football and actually just watched her. It was during the 3rd weekend that she showed me the video. She came to the couch and just held out her iPad without saying anything. The screen showed a paused video, the timestamp reading 47 minutes long. The thumbnail was our kitchen. Our old kitchen at the house. What is this? I asked. I made it for school, she said, sitting beside me. But then I kept adding to it. I've been adding to it for almost 2 years. I looked at her, then at the screen. Can I watch it? She thought about it for a moment. Then, I was going to show both of you. But Mom cried when she saw it, and she said I had to show you too. That it wasn't fair if only she got to see. I pressed play. The video was called, and I'm not going to pretend this didn't break something open in me. My dad is quiet, but here's what he does. It was a documentary. My 10-year-old daughter had made a documentary about me. It opened with a clip of our backyard, filmed through a window, where I was on my knees in the dirt next to Callie's garden, restaking the tomatoes after a storm had knocked them sideways. I hadn't told anyone I'd done it. I just noticed on a Sunday morning and gone out and fixed it. Then there was footage of me at the kitchen counter, sometime last winter, reading a handwritten note that Maisie had apparently watched me read 3 times before I folded it and put it in my wallet. I didn't know she'd seen that. The note was from Callie, a small thank you for something I'd done at her clinic. Covered her scheduling for a weekend when one of her staff called out sick. She'd left the note on the counter. Maisie had filmed it all. The small things, the quiet things, months of them. Me driving to Callie's mom's old house after the funeral to help her brother haul boxes, while Callie stayed home with Maisie and didn't know where I'd gone until I got back. Me sitting outside Maisie's bedroom door for 45 minutes one night when she'd been upset about something at school. She'd filmed the shadow of my feet under the door while she sat on the other side. Me rearranging my entire work schedule, twice, to make sure Callie could attend the conference she'd almost skipped because of childcare. Maisie had narrated some of it herself in a 10-year-old's voice, completely matter-of-fact. My dad doesn't say stuff out loud. He just does the stuff. I wanted to make sure someone was writing it down. I had to pause the video. I sat there with the iPad in my hands and my daughter beside me, and I did something I genuinely don't think I had done in front of another person since I was a child. I cried, not the polite kind. The real kind, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from somewhere you didn't know had been sealed shut. Maisie put her hand on my arm and said, "You don't have to feel bad. Daddy, I just wanted you to see what I see." I called Callie that night, not to argue. Not to present the video as evidence or to say, "See, you were wrong." That would have been the old me. The problem solver. The one who converts feelings into documentation. I called her because I was still crying a little, and for the first time in longer than I could remember. I didn't wait until I wasn't. She picked up on the second ring. "I watched it," I said. A pause. Then, "I know. I need to tell you something." Another pause, but she didn't fill it, and that was unusual. She usually fills silences. "I've been showing up for 11 years in the only language I know. And I never taught you to read it. That's not your failure, it's mine. I should have been learning yours at the same time." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. Not cold, just careful. "Daniel, that's a really significant thing for you to say. I know it might be too late," I said. "I'm not saying it to change what you decided. I just needed you to hear it once, the right way. What happened next surprised me." She said, "It might not be too late. We didn't make any dramatic announcement. There was no sudden reconciliation scene with swelling music. Real life doesn't move like that. What happened was slower and stranger and more honest than anything that had come before." Callie asked if I'd be willing to try couples therapy, not the kind where you're already decided, but the actual kind, where both people go in with something they're willing to lose and something they're willing to change. I said yes. Over the following 3 months, I learned things about myself I should have understood at 30 that I was only beginning to understand at 41. My therapist, a quiet man named Gerald who had the most unsettling habit of just letting silence sit in the room, pointed out that I'd grown up in a house where emotion was associated with instability. That I'd learned early that being steady meant being still. That I'd spent my entire adult life confusing stillness with strength and never questioned it. That wasn't Callie's problem to solve, it had never been. The papers on the counter never got filed. That's not the ending I would have written for myself, honestly. It's messier than an ending. It's more like a reset. The kind that makes you look back at an entire relationship and understand it differently, not better or worse, just truer. Maisie still makes videos. Mostly of the dog now, and occasionally of me trying to make homemade pizza, which she finds endlessly entertaining. She doesn't know, or maybe she does. She's perceptive like that the 47-minute video she made for a school project is probably the most important piece of media that will ever exist in my life. A 10-year-old saw what two adults couldn't communicate to each other. She just wrote it down. There's a question I keep turning over, and I want to leave it with you. Have you ever shown love in a way the other person simply couldn't see? Or have you ever failed to recognize someone else's love because it didn't look the way you expected it to? Drop your answer in the comments below. I think more of us carry this than we ever admit.